Welcome to this demo on the NetIQ Risk Service. Hello, my name is Kent Purdy, Product Marketing Manager for the NetIQ Identity Access products. And here with me I have Senior Product Manager Grish Kumar, who manages several access management products, including the Risk Service. And this demo is about showing off some use cases and capabilities of the Risk Service. So with that, Grish, I'll hand it off to you.
Hello everyone, and thank you, Kent. So today we'll talk about Risk Service. Before we jump onto the demo, let's talk a little bit about what Risk Service is and what it does for you. NetIQ Risk Service is an independent product and a common service that's available with the NetIQ Identity and Access Management platform. The Risk Service provides risk computation capabilities for all the integrated products in the NetIQ stack. What it means is that Risk Service has the ability to look at a number of contextual information of the user, who the user is, where they are logging in from, what kind of access rights they have, the profile information, what are the historical accesses the user has performed in different systems. Is the user connecting from a known device or an unknown device? Do we know any other additional information from the user that's collected from the external connected systems, including systems such as your CASP systems or your web access firewall systems or your network monitoring systems? And it also have the ability to look at external behavior intelligence system, including Interset, the machine learning platform, and use all this information to compute a risk for the user's access to any application, sensitive or not. This information is used by a series of NetIQ Identity and Access Management products, including Advanced Authentication, Access Manager, API Manager, and Privilege Account Manager for deciding whether to allow the user to access the system, whether to enforce a multi-factor authentication, or whether to provide a privilege control for the user. So Risk Service is a common service that provides these capabilities, and we have 4 integrated products at this point of time. We will have additional products that will be integrated with Risk Service down the line. And as I said, it's a product that's designed to integrate with multiple products, both for gathering risk information as well as propagating risk and the behavioral information of the user collected through various information systems. So let us move on and see how the risk policy looks like. So in my example, I've taken the risk-based service integrated into Access Manager. Now, Access Manager has been offering the risk-based capability for a considerable period of time, but the same risk engine is right now available as an independent service and integrated into other products. So all the capabilities that you see are part of the broader risk service itself. In this case, you would see this is the landing page when you create a configuration window for risk. It gives you, again, configuration options for various information stores, your history, user profile, location information, IP address, and whatnot. As I mentioned, it also have the ability to look at an external application, such as a CASP, which I demonstrate during our demo, and look at device information, whether you're connecting from a mobile device or a corporate device and whatnot, and have the ability to control authentication and authorization based on this. So broadly, there are 2 concepts here. One of them is identification of risk even before the user connects to the system. Use cases typically ranges from users' ability to, your organization's ability to adjust the login screens or even the login mechanism that you would even provide to the user by looking at the type of device or the location where the user logging from. For example, if the user is logging in from Brazil, you would want to show them a Portuguese page. And if it's from a mobile device, then automatically adjust the pages to the mobile devices, specific UI formats, right? So those kind of ability is provided by the pre-authentication risk. Further down, users also have a post-authentication risk score where you'll be able to look at that information for controlling additional authentication requirements or access control requirements. So you can look at any of these information that you gathered based on the user for risk computation and use that to send off for authorization systems, including Access Manager. One of the things is that Risk Service also provide a step-by-step guide and a try now that would allow, for example, a user to, okay, I have created a try now, but let's launch one more time. The try now will allow a user to, or an administrator to look at a set of most commonly used policies that would allow you to start using the system very quickly. For example, we often see customers using an ability to control internal versus external access, right? If the user is connecting from a known device from an internal network, allow them a quick access versus an external user will be forced to do a two-factor authentication. Or you can even control the time of login. So if, for example, if the user is accessing at a known time or known office hours, either based on the history or based on a pre-decided time, you'll be able to give them seamless access and force a two-factor authentication if it's outside of that window, right? So these are set of standard policies which most organizations deploy. And using the try now, you'll be able to quickly deploy these policies. I'll walk through the dial and other things using a little more intuitive policy for you. Okay, let's go to a little more complex policy, right? Something that shows the power of the risk engine. So I have created a specific, risk policy, set of risk policies here. For this particular demo. In this risk policy, I have 4 different rules. The first rule is a CASP policy check. What it essentially do is to look at an external CASP system, which I've integrated with. Most common CASP systems exposes their rules computation through APIs. So you'll be able to do an API integration with most of the commercially available CASP systems. In this particular case, the CASP rule checks whether there is a policy violation that has happened. In our CASP's case, basically there is a field called access policy, and we created a particular policy violation information called as false 2FA. So if there's an access policy violation that happened, then we would force a two-factor authentication. In my example demo, which we'll see in a moment, all the users have an access policy violation created. That is a hypothetical case just to show that this policy will take into action. Okay, I have a few more other policies configured here. One of the other policies is called as geo-velocity, and this is something that we see more and more customers are configuring very actively these days. Geo-velocity policy essentially looks at simultaneous or near simultaneous login of the same user identity from different locations or different time zones, and controls such logins. So, for example, if you identify that user Bob logs in from San Francisco at 10 a.m. and you see a login request for user Bob from New York at 11 o'clock, you know pretty well sure that the user will have no way to travel at that particular distance in that specific time. So you would be able to control such logins and either enforce multi-factor authentication or outrightly deny such logins. In my case, I say that if you see a geo-velocity violation, I would outrightly deny that particular user access. Similarly, behavior analytics rule uses the Interset machine learning platform for identifying the user's behavior. It looks at the behavior over a period of time and use that information to decide whether the user should get access or not. In this particular case, when the behavioral analytics rule turns back with a higher risk, I turn that as a risk level of medium, and if no other risk level executes, I would force for a two-factor authentication. you would see that also in action. And then there is a fourth rule I created called blacklisted IP rule. So blacklisted IP rule, for example, have the ability to look at external web services, or even an external database, or even an internal database to look for different kind of restricted IP locations. In my example, I have a data source, internal data source that is being used, and it will look for the data source for known blacklisted IP addresses or IP addresses that have been spoofed. You will see these databases readily available from many of the public services and organizations. So you have the ability to either directly look for a web service or download the database for a fee and use that for as your IP address check. You also have the ability, for example, to look for user history, and user history will allow you to see if the user has in the past logged in from a similar IP address, and you have the ability to decide the course of authentication based on that. Pretty much all the rules allow you to combine this with multiple rules. So a combination of rules or different conditions can also be created inside a specific rule.
So when you say combine, is that like an and or an or? I mean,
you have the ability to decide how do you want to combine two.
Okay.
For example, in this particular case, give me an example. So I created a geolocation rule, and in this particular case, you can say what you want to do, right? You want to do an AND group or a condition group, or you want to do a different conditional group, right? So you can further define different kind of conditional groups, right?
Oh, there you go.
An AND operation, or a combination of that. So you have all those abilities available. So it's a very flexible and powerful rules computation engine that we have available with the service. Apologies for showing this up a little slower. This is a remote system, so I'm just trying to use the best of it. So there are other things that I would like to call out. One of them is toggle. When you create many rules, you need to see how each of these rules would behave, right? So you can test what rule means and what would be the condition and validation, right? So you can see that if this particular rule passes and this doesn't fail, what would be the result of a particular user's login, right? So you do have the ability. So in this case, it's a deny rule. It means it's outright deny for all the users. So you have different kinds of combinations available, right? You can try it out and then find the appropriate result for the users. You also have the ability to control the behavior. Right? You don't have to stick to this particular timeline. You can, or the risk level, you have the ability to decide what kind of risk you need. So risk level is high or greater than equal to, various conditions can be added to this as well. Okay, so that's the high level I just want to quickly give. By the way, let's look at a policy like conditions. So I just want to show the flexibility that you have here too. In the behavior analytics rule, for example, you have different condition sets that you can use, right? What you need to perform. You can even create a custom risk level and what would be the risk score for each of the condition being met or not met based on how you want to create this. All right, so that is that. Let's look at a couple of examples of how a user logs in and what happens when each of these things happen, right? So as I said, I have enabled CASB policy check for all users so that it fails for all users, so that you can see a forced two-factor authentication. I mean, having a seamless access is anyway something that you're all aware of. So I have an application here where my users will log in against. And I have a user named Brandon. Brandon logs in, and as we stated earlier, CASB rule failed. So the CASB rule failed, and the user is forced to do a two-factor authentication. I'll walk through some of these, why we know that CASB rule failed in this instance. So I have configured a two-factor authentication using a code that's shared from the device. So let me enter that. and Brandon has logged into the application. Once again, apologies for the delay in opening this up. It's a remote application. Anyway, so there are no many applications, but this is just to give you a glimpse of, what would it be. This is supposed to be a application portal where other applications would be configured. You can see it's Brandon Berry who logged in, and we would see the risk of Brandon right? So you know that Brandon has logged in, and this location, I am currently placed in San Francisco, and my local time is 1 o'clock or 1:50. So I have a remote machine that is located in Bangalore. So I just want to show you what behavior would be if it's a similar user logs in from a location outside of San Francisco at the same time, or even at a similar time frame. So
yeah, that's an interesting point. How does it calculate what is possible and what's not possible? What's the threshold?
That is the threshold is something which you set, right? And the configuration allows you to set the threshold, right?
Got it.
In my case, okay, sorry about that. In my case, there is a geo-velocity threshold of 4 hours that's been set. Now, that depends on the organization's tolerance limit and how it would be, and what you do and all those things, right? So it is totally flexible. And once again, geo-velocity can be combined with other rules. It need not have to be just based on the location. This uses only location. You can use location and an IP address and a combination of those set of rules, conditions for checking your geo-velocity.
Yeah, it looks like you could have a one threshold would force a 2FA, and then you could chain on another one that would just simply deny access.
Right. That's right, yes. So if you see that location and IP address may not be a big of a difference because it's the same user anyway. Location and history pattern shows that these kind of things are not something that you would expect, then deny the access. Right? Those kind of conditions are possible.
Got it. Okay, didn't mean to derail you there.
No,
so Brandon, okay. Brandon, here's Brandon here.
Let's go back to Brandon. So this is once again, this is a remote machine. You can see it's 3:25 a.m. This is based in Bangalore, India, and let's log in from there. And the behaviors, the rule policy got violated because the same user is being identified as logging from a remote location. At that point of time, the access is outright denied. Okay? So that shows the effect of the geo-velocity rule that is being executed.
Yeah. So if you got, knowing you have about 5 minutes left, what do you want to highlight for the next 5 minutes here, Girish?
Oh yes. So let us go to the most interesting and newly added capabilities to behavior analytics. Right. The behavior analytics again, from a rule point of view, behavior analytics is a very, very interesting thing. It looks at a combination of a wide range of users' pattern of access. So let us log out as Brandon, and I will show you a use case here. In my use case here, there is a particular user, Joshua, and Joshua's system is invariably affected by a malware, and the malware triggered a number of unauthorized access from Joshua's system. We'll see that unauthorized access in the results page, but what is the effect on such a case, right? The behavioral analytics system identified this, and Joshua's access has been denied. But why does it really happen? Let's look at in the set behavioral analytics system, which is integrated here, and I have loaded the user here, Joshua Newman. So you can see that there is a spike of violations or high risk conditions that has happened from Joshua. It is basically medium risk and low risk activities that have happened in many point of time. But a combination of these many medium risk would trigger an overall high risk score for the user. For example, in this particular case, you can see that it is observed that Joshua has logged in a higher number of times compared to his peers, and even compared to his own history to a particular sensitive application. Right? So it does a peer group analysis, and it also does an analysis against his own history and identify that information to raise the risk score. So a combination of such factors, right? You can even look at the specific information of Joshua's pattern of access. And you can see a combination of such activities has created a higher risk score for Joshua, which is communicated back to the to NetIQ Risk Service. And NetIQ Risk Service identified that this particular user access should deny. You can see that even though the risk level is being triggered as medium, the CASP policy check has already stated that the user has already violated the CASP policy. So a combination of these activities has forced the user has forced the system to deny the access for the users.
So you could set up the rules that if Joshua was accessing lower risk resources, that that same risk value returned by interset would not really trigger anything, or might do a 2FA, but because CASB offers a higher risk, that you're offering a more stronger reaction to that.
That is right. That is right. And you have the ability to, in any of these rules, right? You have the ability to say that certain set of rules apply to certain set of applications. So some of the rules apply only to sensitive application, and then when you can change the overall risk that have been communicated to the external systems as well, based on the sensitivity of the application, even the behavior of the user, and all that. You can also send the risk information back to an external system, so external system can take an action. For example, an API-based application can lower the access of a user, even though the user can get access to the application. The rights that's allowed to the user, the authorization that's allowed to the user, can be restricted based on the risk level. And those are the capabilities that the system provides.
There we go. Well, Grish, thanks so much. We're just a tad over time, but that was a really good demo. Well, first of all, before closing down, please check out our other demos, identity and access management demos. They will be posted both in the on-demand section of Universe, and then but they'll also be transitioned over to YouTube a little bit later. You can scan those on YouTube. And if you want to learn more about the Risk Service, please check out the product page on the Micro Focus website, and reach out, hit the contact us button if you have any further questions from there. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.